Brand new Minnesota Vikings trade target has been taking Vikings Nation by storm as one that will absolutely set this franchise apart from the rest of the NFL. We're going to be talking about who that is and how an impact for a trade for him would set the Vikings on a upward trajectory for seasons to come. We're going to be talking about all of that here in this video. Before we get into it, however, we know that 91% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot to get all of your Minnesota Vikings news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button. Join us here on the channel as we cover everything Minnesota Vikings related. Without any further ado, however, we need to get into our first topic here of the video, and the main one, which is a big trade target. The Minnesota Vikings are targeting Greg Newsome II from the Cleveland Browns on a deal which would absolutely be perfect for the Minnesota Vikings, and I will explain why. We know the Vikings cornerback situation right now is not the best, and it hasn't been for quite some time. And we know Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has mentioned that he's going to make some big splashes here at this trade deadline to make sure that this team stays on the upward trajectory for this season as well as for years to come. The Minnesota Vikings this season have been really catching everybody by surprise, not expecting to be as good as they are, and now with two back-to-back losses, Kwesi don't want to make this team go downwards, and especially if they're going to trade their first round pick, which would absolutely be the perfect scenario for the Vikings right now if that pick were to be anywhere in the, let's say, 15 or below of the first round. And adding to that would be certainly adding to the defense. The defense is one thing that Brian Flores really has made everybody super surprised by. He's been absolutely working that well, but teams seem to be catching on to his defense and really might need a change here or there. And one slot to do that would be cornerback. I'm going to pull up our first screenshot here of the video. It says the Vikings starting cornerbacks Shaq Griffin, Stephon Gilmore, and Byron Murphy Jr. have been generally solid but inconsistent at times. The bigger issue, however, lies in the depth behind them. Caleb Evans has struggled since last season, and backups Fabian Moreau and Dwight McGlothern have been inactive for most of the year. If any of the starters need a rest to go down to injury, the talent drop is significant. And that is one thing that Vikings fans have been well aware of for the past few seasons, especially going back to some of the drafts that we had seen in recent memory, where the cornerbacks we drafted really seemed to not work out. And the Vikings are kind of in the injury bug right now, starting with J.J. McCarthy, obviously, then T.J. Hawkinson, well, the beginning of this year, ending of last season, and now Christian Darrisaw as well. And really revealing the Vikings need to have that presence there that will help them in any situation due to injury. And we've seen that can be a big issue for many teams around the NFL, and the Vikings do not want to end up in that situation. Greg Newsome, a cornerback, star cornerback for the Browns, 24 years old, has been really a name that's been thrown out there by many, many other teams, including division rival, the Green Bay Packers. And we know that we wouldn't want this situation to end up in the opposing hands, I guess we could say, in the wrong hands, going to the Green Bay Packers. So the Vikings may choose to make a big splash before that. And pulling up our next screenshot here, trading for cornerback would not only add a much-needed depth, but it could also bring in a potential starter for the 2025. All three of the Vikings' current starting cornerbacks will become free agents after the season, leaving Evans and the injured Mekhi Blackmon as the only viable options under contract for next year. Meaning that the Vikings would either have to really go well in free agency, in the draft, whatnot. And if they're going to trade that first round pick, that draft situation for a cornerback could be a very big challenge. So really all signs are pointing to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah making this trade for Greg Newsome II. Now, whether or not this will actually go down, I hope it does, but we really can't confirm anything. We know that there are many, many options the Vikings are choosing to explore here, and a lot of those are kind of everywhere. We know we're looking for an offensive lineman, adding to the defense on many sides of the ball, defensive line, secondary, whatnot, and we're trying to make this team just a bit better, but not just for this season, for the future as well. And Greg Newsome II is one of those candidates to do both. We know that T.J. Hawkinson's addition in 2022 was one that would really set this team apart for that season, and even until right now, we're seeing him coming back. We know how big of an impact that this is. So having a guy like Greg Newsome, who we can have for years to come, still on his rookie deal, this is a perfect situation for right now, for the future, and for whatever the Vikings want to turn themselves into. What it looks like we're turning into would absolutely make this team a powerhouse. And as we move on to another screenshot here, one player who would make a sense for the Minnesota is Greg Newsome II of the Cleveland Browns, drafted in 2021. Newsome has some reliable presence in Cleveland secondary. He broke out a bit last season with 14 passes defended and 2 interceptions. Newsome's versatility, he can play both outside and in the slot, makes a pretty attractive option for the Vikings, as he can either challenge Murphy for a starting spot or provide invaluable depth. And there's many options, as you can see there, that Greg Newsome II could use. He could either play in the slot, could play deep, whatever you want him to do, he can do it. He's been proven to do that with the Browns, and especially the situation the Browns are in right now with having Deshaun Watson going down, really, well, surprising everybody with a big win yesterday against the Baltimore Ravens. We don't know how this is going to work out. We don't know what their plan is, whether they try and start selling, whether they have already, made a move for Amari Cooper, trading him, whether they continue to make some more moves, or whether they try to just kind of stay afloat. It really depends, and I think Greg Newsome would be one of these options if the team does decide to sell, would be one of the hot commodities on this team. And with many teams looking for a guy like Greg Newsome, who has so much versatility, will add depth, could be a starter wherever you put him, a lot of teams are going to be trying to pressure the Browns into making a deal for him, and especially with what the Vikings are looking for, it's the perfect fit. Let's be honest. We know that we need some extra corner. We need some depth just about everywhere, and having Greg Newsome fits kind of that entire checklist of what the Minnesota Vikings need to do. And pulling up the next screenshot here, just 24 years old and still on his rookie contract, Greg Newsome would add a long-term asset for the Vikings. Should the Browns decide to part ways with him as they would rebuild, Minnesota could capitalize on his talent for both this season and next, and then go into, obviously, a contract extension from there if things were viable, or once again, another trade. But the proposed trade that they have here is Minnesota sends a Caleb Evans, a 2025 fifth-round pick, and a 2026 third-round pick to Cleveland for Greg Newsome, and a 2025 seventh. And really, looking at this deal, this is a very, very good one. Obviously, the third-round pick has quite a bit of value just because a third-round pick nowadays is definitely something that where you can get a few sneaky players. A lot of players are dropping depending on the needs of other teams, but for what you're getting for Greg Newsome, the former first-round pick, I see nothing wrong with giving up a third for him. A third-round pick that ultimately there could be and hopefully will be a lower end, probably an early fourth. Some could consider it if the Vikings do end up starting the same way as this season, staying healthy and going on from there with J.J. McCarthy next season. This could be a very, very good value trade for the Minnesota Vikings if it does come down to it and if the Vikings do propose. And even with this trade, if other teams are trying to up the offer, trying to make a better deal, this would certainly fall into the hands of the Minnesota Vikings a lot more because they can handle a bit of back and forth in a trade offer. They can add value, some more picks. They can add a player in there if need be. But I think a Caleb Evans, a fifth, a third, for Greg Newsome and a seventh would certainly fill that docket for what the Browns are looking for, but also what the Minnesota Vikings are looking for. So let me know what you think about this trade in specific, because I think this is a pretty specific one that could be something the Browns would consider, but also I think the Vikings have a bit of leverage on this, being able to negotiate quite a bit. But looking at the PFF grades for Greg Newsome, as you can see, they're not the best. They're kind of in the middle of the pack, a little bit less than mediocre, but that's a lot because of the Browns. The Browns are not a good team, once again. We know that. That's no surprise to anybody. But the way he's also playing, it is not really representative of this when you also have a team that's just really, really bad in the Cleveland Browns. But we know that this could be better with a different scheme, and Brian Flores could certainly make these some elite numbers. And even with some little work, whatever position they put him in, a lot of upside is coming from Greg Newsome here. Even with these, a lot of teams might try to stray away, but I think the Vikings should definitely be one of these teams that are considered as contenders for Greg Newsome. So let me know what you think about a potential Greg Newsome II trade. I think it's a very interesting one that the Vikings may choose to explore sooner rather than later, knowing that the market for Greg Newsome is only going to grow from here. So let me know what you think, but that's all I got in this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like. If you're here at this point in the video, make sure to hit the sub button. Get all your Minnesota Vikings news right here. Me and Griffin getting you guys with everything that we have to offer. But that's all we got. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.